Hey everyone, today we're jumping into the incredible world of geolocation. It's basically the art and science of figuring out the exact where and when of something, using just a picture or a video. It's like being a digital detective, piecing together tiny clues from pixels to find one specific spot anywhere on Earth.
So let's get right to it. How can one single picture literally stop a war, or be the key piece of evidence that documents a crime? I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, but as we're about to see, the ability to prove where a photo was taken has had absolutely world-changing consequences. This isn't just for spy agencies anymore. It's a tool for journalists and investigators, and honestly, the stakes have never been higher.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the basics of geolocation and check out the tools everyone's using. Then, we're going to see it in action, from a nail-biting Cold War crisis to the front lines of the conflict in Ukraine. And to wrap it all up, we'll go over the super important ethical code that has to guide this kind of work.
Okay, Section 1. Pinpointing truth from pixels. Look, we live in an age of nonstop misinformation, right? Not to mention AI-generated images that look totally real. So being able to look at a photo and independently prove where it was taken, that's not just a neat trick anymore. It's absolutely critical.
There's a formal name for this whole field: geospatial intelligence, or GOINT for short. For decades, this was something only governments could do. It's the official practice of taking satellite photos, aerial shots, and all sorts of geographic data and turning it into intelligence you can actually act on.
But here's where things get really interesting. Traditional GEOINT, that's the stuff that uses top-secret spy satellites and drones. But the revolution we're seeing now is all about OSINT geolocation. This uses open-source tools, things you and I can access right now, like Google Earth and social media. It has completely democratized the power to find the truth. So, what's actually in this new democratic toolkit? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the essential digital tools that have totally transformed this field, putting incredible power in the hands of investigators, journalists, and hey, even just curious people all over the world.
And this really is the core of it. You've got your foundations, right? Google Maps and Google Earth to get your bearings, but then you have these amazing specialized tools. Something like SunCalc can analyze the shadows in a photo to tell you what time of day it was taken, or what is where, which lets you search map data for really specific things like a certain type of building. And of course, a vital tool like reverse image search, which helps you trace a photo back to its original source to get more context.
All right, now let's see how all this stuff works in the real world. We're going to rewind the clock and go back to the Cold War. This was a time of extreme paranoia, where being able to see what the other side was up to wasn't just a strategic advantage, it was a matter of survival. This period is really the birth of modern GEOINT. It kicked off with the legendary U-2 spy plane, flying at the very edge of space to take pictures of Soviet territory. Then came the Corona satellites, which, get this, literally dropped buckets of film from orbit that had to be caught in mid-air by a plane. These programs gave undeniable proof that the so-called missile gap with the Soviets was just not true. And then, in 1962, they delivered images that brought the world closer to nuclear annihilation than it has ever been.
And all of this was driven by a single powerful idea. When you're in a standoff with a nuclear-armed adversary, you can't just take their word for it. President Eisenhower's strategy was simple: trust, but verify. He had to see the truth with his own eyes. And that simple phrase is still the philosophical bedrock of all geolocation work today. Which brings us right to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets were flatly denying that they'd put nuclear missiles in Cuba, but the pictures from those U-2 spy planes, they gave President Kennedy the cold, hard evidence he needed. This wasn't just data, it was proof. It let him confront the Soviets from a position of undeniable strength and navigate the crisis with diplomacy, pulling the world back from the brink of nuclear war.
The tools have definitely changed since the 60s, but that core mission of verification is more urgent than ever. So let's fast forward to today. On the modern front lines, in places like Ukraine, it's not just governments doing this work. It's civil society organizations, or CSOs, using OSINT to document potential war crimes as they happen.
But these modern-day investigators face a whole new set of problems. As this quote gets at, there's often a real disconnect between the groundbreaking work they're doing on the ground and the formal, sometimes painfully slow international legal system. They're gathering all this vital evidence, but there's a constant fear that it'll just be dismissed because it wasn't collected the old-fashioned way. And the work is just incredibly complex. Today's investigators have to follow really strict standards for evidence, like something called the Berkeley Protocol, which is basically a rulebook for making sure digital evidence will actually hold up in court. They're using every tool they have, from reverse image searching a photo of a bombed-out building to using satellite maps to prove its location, all while making sure that digital chain of evidence is perfect. And they're doing all this while being absolutely swamped by a torrent of data coming out of an active war zone. And that brings us to our last, and honestly, our most important section. These tools give us an unbelievable amount of power. The power to find a location, to prove a fact, to expose a lie. But with that power comes a huge, profound responsibility to use it the right way. So we have to ask the question straight up. In a world where a few clicks could potentially expose someone's private information, what are the rules of the road? What's the code that separates a responsible investigator from just a digital vigilante?
Well, to navigate this, good investigators live by a clear, ethical framework. Here are 4 of the big rules. Number 1, always double-check your location with at least 2 different sources. 2, document everything you do, so your findings are provable facts, not just accusations. 3, and this is a big one, protect the privacy of everyday people and victims, always. And 4, remember, AI and other tech are just tools. A human being is always, always responsible for the final call.
So we end up right back where we started. That same principle, trust but verify, that guided a president through a nuclear crisis is now guiding analysts through a chaotic digital world. In our modern age of deepfakes and constant disinformation, maybe this skill, the ability to look at something and say it with total certainty, I know where this happened and I can prove it, is more essential than it's ever been. It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.